Good evening, everyone. Now we're going to learn a little Hebrew as usual. This week's reading is Vayishlach. Can you say that? Vayishlach. And you guys that are online in Zoom, if you wouldn't mind if you would mute your mics, because we can hear you through the Zoom. So that'd be nice. Okay, and here are the letters that we're going to learn tonight. Now, I don't know why. I think it's the way my hand writes or something like that, but this is a really hard letter for me to write. It's really not that hard, but I have a hard time with it. So I do it like that. What letter would that be? Samek. Okay? Just like almost like a number 6, but I'm doing it backwards. This is why it's always, this one just gets me. Boom. Boom. Okay, it's easier in the ancient language because it is like a thorn that looks a little bit like that. And it means thorn or crab or hate or protect. Why would it mean that? Because at night, when you had sheep, what they would do is they would surround them with thorns, okay, to keep the bad animals out. Okay? The samek is a s, okay? S is what it makes. The next letter is ayin. Ayin. Ayin looks a little bit like a Y, but the bottom of it just goes over. Okay, that's the letter ayin. Ayin is a silent letter. And if it's in the ancient Hebrew, it's really easy to remember. Ayin is an eye. Okay? And then it means look or watch or see or behold or know. Because you look and you know. Okay? There is a word there which uses one of these letters. There are not many words in Hebrew that use only samek and ayin together. Okay, you noticed in the other words that we're learning, you're learning words that are using the letters that you're learning, and only the letters that you're learning. This is a really hard one to find any of those words. Okay, so we're going to look at the word salak. Okay, and it is a samek and a lamed and a hate. Okay, so it looks like that. It's salach, and it means forgive. There are other Hebrew words that mean forgive, other than that one, okay? But salak is forgive. Another word that is used in Hebrew that really is more of a is used more would be the word nisa, which means lift off. Lift off. Or nasa is, I think, the root verb, and it means lift off. Okay? So when he forgives you, it's like he lifts off the weight of the burden in his forgiveness of you, which is really nice, isn't it? All right, now back into the Bible, and we're going to begin in Genesis 32. And we're back with Jacob and Esau. Now, remember, where Where has Jacob been the last 14 years at least? He's been up north in Haran with Laban, all right? And it's not been really easy for him up there. Although he has grown rich, it wasn't easy for him. Okay, and then he left with all of his wives and all of his children, and Laban ran to get him, ran up to see if he could bring him back. But God met Laban on the way and said, you know what? You need to leave him alone. He's mine. Leave him alone, right? Okay. So now Jacob is going back to the land where he was born and raised. He's going back to his mom and dad's house. And remember when he left, what was going on with his brother Esau? What were like the last words that you read about Esau? I'm gonna kill him. Okay, which is when Jacob's mom, Rivka, looked at him and she was like, you need to get out of here. Okay, go north. Go up to your uncle Laban. So he did. Now he's on his way back. As he's on his way back, he is remembering that his brother wants him dead. He knows that he has to go back because God met him. Remember? Yehovah met him and he was like, get up, go home. So he's on his way home and he's prayed, and now he's going to pray again because he's going to meet his brother. So we read, Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau, to the land of Seir and the field of Edom. Edom is the land where Esau lived. All right? The word that is used here, messengers, is the word malach, which is the very same word that is used for angel, which is just interesting. Okay? And this is the first example in Torah where a human being uses a malach, and it uses that word, a messenger. Okay? I don't even know if that's significant, but it's interesting. Okay? So now Jacob is sending these malachim out. Yes? No, wait, when we're done. And he commands them. And he says this is what you should say to my lord Esau. By the way, that word my lord is a word that is of honor. Okay? It just means the honorable, my lord. This is what your servant Jacob said. I've been staying with Laban and have lingered till now. And now I have come to possess oxen and donkeys and flocks and male servants and female servants. And I sent word to tell my lord in order to find favor in his eyes. Okay? In other words, I'm gonna do everything I can do to ease my brother's anger and to let him know, look, let's let bygones be bygones. I am not here to hurt you at all, right? Okay. Now, how many of you have heard of Rambam? Okay, otherwise known as Maimonides, the medieval Jewish rabbi who wrote a lot and is read and quoted to this very day in Judaism. Okay, his idea was that what Jacob was doing was he was giving honor, and the honor and respect that a younger brother ought to give to an elder brother. And in this way, he was letting Esau know that he, Jacob, recognized you are the elder brother. It doesn't mean you have the birthright, because that's already been done, right? The birthright and the blessing. However, you remain the elder brother, and I want you to know that I'm honoring you in that. Okay? So the messengers go and they deliver, and now they're coming back. And they say to Jacob, "We went to your brother, to Esau, and he's coming out to meet you. Oh, and by the way, he has 400 men with him." So Jacob became extremely afraid and distressed. Okay? And that means an army, by the way. 400 men didn't only mean that, Esau gathered up a group of men and they were going to all have a big party together. This is like Esau is on his way and he's got an army with him. Okay? And Jacob had every reason to believe that Esau wanted him dead. I put the verse in here from back in 27 where where you read that he bore a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, "Let the time for my mourning my father draw near so that I can kill my brother Jacob." So no wonder Jacob was a little worried about what was going to happen. By the way, in Hebrew, the word extremely or great is the word meod. 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 Okay, it means much, abundance, great, extremely meod. And that he was afraid is the word yare. Yare. Some of you guys already know that word. And that he was distressed is the word zarar. It means bind up, tie up, be restricted, narrow, or cramped. Jacob was really worried. It wasn't like, I don't know if that's going to work out well. No, he was shaken, worried. Okay? So in the midst of this, now have you ever been like that? Has that ever happened to you? Or you've been afraid, like you have a big fear of something? So what do? How do you get over it? Okay, rebuke it. That's a good way to do it. We know that. Face it. Make a deal with God. Now you're all right, Jacob. Because here we go. Did you read these? Oh, all right. Okay, deliver me. So Jacob goes to Yehovah, and he's like, "Help, God, deliver me, please, from my brother's hand, from Esau's hand. I'm afraid he will come and strike me. Not only me, but the mothers and the children." And then he reminds Yehovah, "You yourself said, I will certainly do good with you and make your seed like the sand of the sea that cannot be counted because of its abundance." Okay, so here's the deal. Jacob was very afraid. Jacob had already been given the word of God by God directly to him that I will be with you, I will guard you, I will bring you back into the land of your fathers. All right? I am with you. He had already gotten that word, number one. Secondly, God had already delivered on that word more than once. When he went there and he was with Laban, that was not an easy number of years that he was there. And yet, in all of it, God blessed and blessed and blessed again. So he's coming back, and now when he went there, he had nothing. Remember, he didn't even have any dowry to give. But now he's on his way back, and he's rich. I mean, he's got all these animals. He's got wives. He's got children. He's got concubines. He has all of these things that make one in the ancient world rich. Okay? And yet, he doesn't know if maybe this time God's not going to help him. Anybody ever have that going on? It's like, Lord, I look back and you help me here and you help me here and you help me here. But now we have this crisis going on. What are you going to do? How are you going to help me? This is exactly where Jake was. And what I think is amazing about this is that the Bible doesn't hide this from its readers. Okay? We get to read about these human beings and we find out they're human beings, just like we are. And they have worries and they have fears and anxieties and angers and bitterness and all of that. It's all right there laid out, obvious. Okay? That then the idea is that real, honest faith is a struggle. Sometimes. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it is. Okay? When we're in the midst of whatever we're in the middle of, sometimes that isn't easy. And I think it's great that, when God gave this and Moses wrote this and whoever else was involved, that they were like, no, we're not going to make these guys out to be like superheroes, because it's not about that. It's real. I love that about the word. Okay, now, so Jacob asks, Yehovah, Elohim, I need you. I need your help. Deliver me. This is what I'm worried about. Okay, and there's no word that he gets unworried, okay, right away. But he has prayed about it, but then he acts, okay, from which we learn that prayer and action often go together. Sometimes they don't go together because sometimes there's nothing you can do, right? But when there is something that you can do it, all right? And that's what Jacob does, okay? He gets his servants to begin to bring these gifts to his brother. And he sends them in waves. Okay, bring them these animals and these gifts. When you get there, tell him these are from Jacob, your brother. He's really happy, okay, that you're going to meet. And then, so Esau's going along with his 400 men, and then here comes another with another gift and a wave of gifts. Okay, why is he doing that? It says right here in verse 21, he's speaking to his servants. These are the words that you're to say. Look, your servant Jacob is behind us. Okay? That's the second use of that word, your servant, not your brother, not the guy who ripped you off. Okay? Your servant. He's doing his best. And then, for he thought, let me appease him with the offering that goes ahead of me, and afterward, when I see him, maybe it will work out well. Literally, when I look at his face, he will lift up mine. Okay? Which is a Hebrew idiom meaning he's going to love me. Okay? It'll be a good meeting. So then, he takes his wives and he crosses over the Jabbok River. Today, the Jabbok River is known as the Zerka. It flows into the Jordan, and it's unique in that it has very steep banks. Has anybody ever been up in the direction of Glen Allen on the river up there, fishing, dip netting? I hear the banks are a little, you got to take it easy. So Jacob crosses over this river with his wives and his children and his animals. All right. And remember, Jacob is not little mealy Jacob. Jacob is a man. Okay. And they cross over the river. I am reminded of, it's been years now, not that many years, but I don't know, 8 years. when I first did the days-long backpacking trip on Crow. Has anybody else ever done that? It's really neat. You begin in Girdwood and you end up in Eagle River. Okay, and you camp overnight. And some people who are nuts run it in a day. Okay, they run it, but it's woods. You're in the wilderness, but you gotta cross Eagle River up near the headwaters by the glacier, and it's easily a 5-minute water adventure. It's not like tick 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 tick, and then you're there. There are some rivers like that, but you get to Eagle River, and it's like from here way out into the parking lot there, and you look at it, and you're like, oh, I got to walk across that. And then you get in and find out how deep it is because you're hoping it's up to your, ankles. And I get in, and it's up to right about there, right about my waist, okay? And the water is moving. It's Eagle River. It is moving, and it'll knock you over. So a lot of groups that do it, they link arm in arm and they cross that way so that they can lift one another up. And I did it that way. But the water is 33 degrees, I think, like 1 degree above freezing. So I read this, and I'm reading about them crossing over the river, and we read that, and we're like, oh, yeah, well, big deal. They crossed over a river. No, it was a big deal. Okay, and then when he gets them over, he goes back. All right, so he's now going to be alone. Jacob remained all by himself. Then a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. This is one of the most odd verses in the Bible. And the whole story of this wrestling match that went on with Jacob and this man. Now, keep in mind that when we read about Abraham, there were 3 men that were there. And one of them was Adonai, right? Okay, so it's easy now. We're looking back, and I can ask, well, who is the man? And rather than you just, well, the man was God. Okay, well, let's dig into that a little bit rather than just giving the normal answer that you already know, because then I'm going to ask, how do you know? How do you know that? That's not the way it reads. When you're reading it, you're not reading that this is God. You're reading that this is a dude at night that may even be a demon. Because when daybreak is about to happen, the being goes, I gotta leave. The sun is rising. So, what is this going on here? Okay? There's a lot more going on than meets the eye. It's more than Jacob wrestling with a man that knocks him in the hip and knocks his hip out of socket. So, we're going to dig into it a little bit. I like what Skip Moen brings out, that the words left alone or all by himself, okay, he was left alone, in Hebrew is yatar labado. And it doesn't just mean by himself, but it is a psychological isolation. It's like, have you ever been alone? Most of us are alone, but we don't really realize that we're alone. We're just, it's nice sometimes to be alone. But this was an alone that was like deep. Like he wasn't only alone because there was nobody there with him. He was alone because he was dealing with something within him. He was dealing with something. Okay? And Skip Moen says Jacob has to come to terms with what he has become. All the manipulation, scheming, lying that creates who he is going to be dealt with right now. He's going to meet a being, and something is going to happen in it. He can't go forward into the land of Yehovah because in that land, Yehovah is the ruler. In other words, Jacob is going to have to learn how to do what? Submit. Okay? And he hasn't done that a whole lot in what we've read in his personality. And in order to do that, he's going to have to do what none of us like to do, which is change, which is exactly what happens. Okay, so a man wrestles with him. Was it a man? Was it an enemy? Was it Yehovah? Was it Yeshua? Was it an angel? Was it Jacob? Was it like a manifestation of Jacob wrestling with his own, psyche? Okay, here are some answers. You would love it if I just gave you the answer, right? Well, I'm not going to do that. Here are some ideas that others have had about this. Okay, one, the Jewish sages believe that this man was the ministering angel of Esau, and that this angel was there in order to bless Jacob and admit that the blessings that Jacob received were rightfully his and not Esau's. Okay, so that's a real belief that many Jewish rabbis have. I don't know about that. Okay, others point out that what is happening here and the fight, the wrestling, the battle that happened is the opening act of a battle that goes on and on and on to this very day between the Jewish people who are represented by Jacob and all of the enemy nations that want them done away with. Okay, that's one of the ideas that they have about what this means. Now, remember when we went over those layers of meaning in Hebrew? There was like the literal layer, the Peshat layer, and then there was like the Darash layer. Okay, so when you read and you hear things like this, our English Western mind goes, well, that isn't at all what this is about. Okay? But it doesn't work that way. I just want you to be aware. It doesn't mean they're right or we're right. I just want you to be aware that that is the way that Jewish rabbinical ideas work. And sometimes they get meanings out of it that we look at and we're like, that, I don't get it. That doesn't mean that. Sometimes when you're reading in the Gospels and you'll read these words and they'll just go over your head like, what in the world are they doing? Well, they're arguing and debating like good rabbis. Okay? All right. Now, have you ever heard of the Zohar? The Zohar. This is in Jewish mysticism. You know what that is? Okay? In the Zohar, they believe that Jacob's battle was with an angel and it was symbolic of man's battle with his darker side. In other words, remember that the natures, okay? You have the good nature and you have the bad nature, okay? This was like looking at Jacob's battle with his natures. I think there is truth in that. I don't think it's all that was going on, but I think that's one thing that was going on. Skip Moen writes, we are to identify with Jacob. Okay, now a lot of what you read in the Bible and what you read in Torah is written in a way that is to get you to walk in the shoes of the one that you're reading about. It's a way that we grow, right? Okay. So if that's the way it is, then we are the ones that are fighting with this man, whoever it is. Okay. And we know that we're not going to be able to go into God's land and cross into God's land unless we lay down, okay, whatever that man is. Well, didn't Yeshua say something like that? You know, if you want to follow me, take up your cross. In other words, there's going to be a death that's going to happen. Okay? And when Paul writes about the death that happens, he even writes and he says, you know what? I die every day. So, in other words, every day there's a battle, and every day I got to lay me down in that battle. Right? Even the great Rabbi Paul, Shaul, admitted every day, I die every day. Okay? Now, Hosea wrote about this event. Okay? He wrote this about Jacob. In the womb, he grabbed his brother's heel, and in his vigor, he strove with God. Vigor, what does that mean? His energy. Okay? In that he strove with God. Yes, he wrestled with the angel and won. He wept and sought his favor. At Bethel he will find us, and there he will speak with us. Okay, so that's a little confusing. Hosea is saying he strove with, he argued with God, and he wrestled with the angel, and he won. You all right? Okay, now we're going to pick that up once we read verse 26 and following. Okay, because here he is, he's going to wrestle with this man, this being, okay, when he saw that he had not overcome him. Notice in this Bible translation, the he and the he are capital letters, meaning they're making the assumption that he's wrestling with God. Okay, so when God saw that he had not overcome Jacob, he struck the socket of his hip so that he dislocated the socket of Jacob's hip when he wrestled with him. And then he, the being or God, said, "Let me go, for the dawn is broken." But he, Jacob, said, "I won't let you go unless you bless me." And so then he said to him, "What is your name?" Like, what? The being doesn't know his name? This is God, and God doesn't know his name? What is going on here? He says, "Jacob." And then he, God, said to him, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but rather Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men, and you have overcome." Okay, what in the world is going on here? Think of it like this, all right? You have these natures within you, just like I do and the rest of us do, that we battle against, all right? There's a way to win that battle, and yet you don't die. You're alive, right? Jacob was alive. He came out of it alive. But what else happened? He had a limp. Maybe forever he had a limp. What does that mean? Why is that, why is that significant? It means that he walked, and he may have walked the right way, but he had a limp when he walked. What is it? Humility. It's the recognition of, you know what? I was doing my best to manipulate everything, to have everything the way that I want it, okay? Exactly how I want it. and he meets God, and God is like, "Oh yeah? You really think you're that big a dude, do you? I know you did this and you did that and you got all these animals now and congratulations and you did all that, but you and me are going to have a little fight right now." Okay, now we know if God wanted to do it, God could have just gone thunk and Jacob would have died in the river. Okay, just taken his head off with a all right, but he didn't. So the wrestling wasn't about God or who God was. The wrestling was about Jacob learning who he was and that he was going to be rewarded. And the reason is he didn't run away. Get it? He didn't run away. He struggled with the being and he didn't run away. He didn't give up, but he learned, right? Now, think back for a minute to Abraham. Okay? Did Abraham have any struggles with God? Yeah. What about when God was about to wipe out Sodom and Gomorrah and Abraham kind of got up in God's face and was like, wait a minute. You are the judge of the whole earth. You're not going to, there's no way you're going to not do right in this situation, right? Okay. So the idea, the word Israel, has more than one meaning, but one of the meanings is one who struggles with God. If you look at the history of Israel, would they live up to that name? Oh, yeah. Okay, they struggle with God throughout the whole Tanakh. All right. Dennis Prager wrote that by giving his people the name Israel, struggle with God, God was not only giving them permission to struggle with him, he was actually asking us to do that. Okay? Doing it makes our faith authentic. You guys are being very quiet as you're looking at this. Okay? The idea is that God knows who you are. He knows what he made when he made you, and he doesn't want you to be a doormat, not even with him. Humility, or the death, or putting to death that old nature, doesn't mean that you lay down like a noodle. Okay? In other words, if you're a man, he wants you to be a man. If you're a woman, he wants you to be a woman and not just lay down. Okay? Bennett writes about Jacob's name and says that the change of the name is quite significant. That Jacob had to get cleaned up and go back to where his journey began, Beit El, the house of Elohim. He had fled the land promised to his fathers and lived in exile, a veritable slave to his father-in-law. When he returned a different man, a man with direction and with purpose and within covenant with Yehovah. This new man was to be named Israel, signifying that he was not the same person the last time he was there. Okay? Jeff Penner, who is the ancient Hebrew research guy, said that this name, Israel, is a verb and not a noun, and it means literally he turns the head of God. Okay, which is like when you yell, Daddy, and Daddy goes, yes. Okay, turns the head of God. So now Jacob is going to give you a little bit of an answer about who the being was, because he names the place Peniel. For I have seen God face to face, and my life has been spared. Why is that significant? Well, we read later, you're going to read later in Torah, nobody has seen God's face. For anybody who does would die. Right? So that's a belief that's already in them. Jacob doesn't know that because Jacob hasn't read this scripture verse passage. Okay? But he names it Peniel, which literally means face of El, face of God. Okay, now the sun rose up just as he crossed the river to Jabbok, right there by Peniel, limping because of his hip. This is why the children of Israel do not eat the tendon of the hip socket to this very day, because he struck the socket of Jacob's thigh on the tendon of the hip. Something neat to learn about that right there is that God gives us ways to remember, like memorials, to remember him by. Okay, and Israel and the Jews are very, very good at making those. So we have like Hanukkah, right? Okay, and you have all of these other events that are built into the Jewish life that have to do with remembering what God has done. You remember by doing this, and you remember by holding this, and you remember by eating this, and you remember by saying these words, and you remember by drinking this, and it all means something. Okay? So now what we do, when we kill an animal, we don't eat that hip joint socket meat. Okay? Why? So we remember Jacob. We remember that he limped. Okay? Which helps us remember that maybe we limp as well. Okay, so that word limp in the ancient Hebrew, it's salah. But in the ancient Hebrew, you have 3 letters. You have a sade, a lamed, and an ayin. Remember the ayin? It's the I. Okay, you have those letters, and it means, okay, if you put it in a sentence, it means on your side or on the ground, recognizing your need for the shepherd, the authority that brings true knowledge. So in Proverbs, you read, the reward of humility and fear of Adonai is riches, honor, and life. Okay? Stop there, breathe. That was a lot. There's a lot going on right there. And I think tonight we kind of just stepped in it a little bit. I think you could go and read and dig on this and find some other amazing insight there. But now they're done. And he's on his way, and he's going to meet his brother, and here's his brother coming right at him. And then we read in 33:4, but Esau ran to meet him, hugged him, fell on his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. Now, I didn't write this in your notes, but listen to these words again and tell me if you've ever heard words like that anywhere else in the Bible. He ran to meet him, he hugged him, he fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Yes, the prodigal The father who runs down the driveway and meets the wayward son, and they fall on one another's neck. Okay? So when you hear Yeshua speaking of that father and that son, remember, in the Hebrew mind, you're going back and you're picking up ideas that have already been dropped in Torah, and you're picking them up. Sometimes they combine them. They'll combine two stories and ideas. Okay? So when they hear that, when they hear about this son and this father, they're going to think of Jacob and Esau, even though they're brothers. Okay, something happened there. What happened there was deep, and it was emotional, and they wept. And why did they weep? All of the reasons that you can imagine. Number one, if I was Jacob, I'd be weeping, going, "Thank you. Thank you that my head is not removed." Right? Thank you that there's some love here. I didn't think there was going to be any love here, but apparently there is a little bit. Okay? So now Jacob, he goes on. He's going to be very honorable toward his brother, and he wants to give him money. He wants to give him an offering of what he has. I mean, Esau wants to give it to him, and Jacob says, "No, please, if I have found favor in your eyes, then you will take my offering from my hand. For this reason, I have seen your face. It is like seeing the face of God, and you've accepted me." Which is a way of also saying God has accepted me. Okay? And why is seeing his brother's face like seeing the face of God? Well, he just got beat up, but he didn't lose, right? With God. And then God gave him a new name and sent him on his way. And now he meets his brother, and he thinks he's going to get beat up, and he doesn't. He doesn't lose, even with his brother. Okay, and remember that we are created in his image. So when his brother met him with honor and not murder, it was like God is in this moment, right here with us and in your face to me. So Jacob moves on. And we read that Jacob arrived in Shalom. In some of your Bibles, it would read Shalem, the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Hadad Aram and camped right in front of the city. The word that is the name of that city, Shalom, is Shin Lamed Mem, and it means wholeness and completeness. And there's a British rabbi named Jonathan Sacks who translates this verse not just "and Jacob arrived in Shalom," but "and Jacob emerged complete." So what do you think that means? That Jacob emerged complete. Okay, he was, how would we say it? He was right with God. He emerged out of all of that years of struggle and mess and anxiety and bitterness and all of that. He emerged out of it and walked into Shalom, which is not only the name of the city, but the reality of what he was now living in. Shalom. But he limped. Just saying. You can limp and be in shalom. Okay? So you're going to write down your questions and ask them when we get to the end. Okay, we're almost at the end. All right? Now, there's another story that you read about Dinah. When Dinah, Leah's daughter, whom she bore for Jacob, went out to look at the other daughters of the land. In other words, she was going to hang out with the girls. That's all it means. All right? Which was not abnormal. Okay? There's a guy named Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, a prince of the land. And he saw her and he raped her. Okay? Literally, he made her suffer. This was not anything that Dinah did. This was all on Shechem. And you got to remember, those that didn't worship Yehovah in the land, the ites in the land, Canaanites, Hivites, Amalekites, all the ites, all right? That wasn't a big deal with them. To just see a woman, take the woman. Especially if the woman belonged to another group or another nation. Yeah, do it. It wasn't a big deal to them. Okay, which is why when you read it, he goes to his dad and he's like, "Dad, man, I love this girl. I want her to be my wife." And his dad's like, "All right, see if we can make a deal." Isn't that what happens? Okay. Now, Jacob, I missed one. I missed the 30. No, I didn't. I'm good. So, what happens? Simeon and Levi, who are Jacob's brothers, Dinah's brothers, okay, by one mother, they are going to go get revenge on these guys for doing that to their sister, Dinah, all right? And they convince these guys that they would love to be able to give their sister Dinah in marriage, although Dinah's been basically imprisoned by Shechem and Hamor, because we want her to be, my son's wife. And the only way they're going to get her back is either over their dead bodies or a really good deal. So they have an idea. And the idea is, you know what? You can have any of our women you want. Why don't we mix and mingle together and we'll give you our women? Maybe we can take some of your women. All right. But the only thing we need to do is all your men need to be circumcised. Great plan. And all the guys of the land are like, all right. All I can think is these Israelite women must have been something. Something. Because those guys were like, all right, sounds like a good idea. So they do it. They do the circumcision deed, and then we read, on the third day. Isn't that interesting? That day. Third day. That happens over and over and over and over again in the Bible to get to the resurrection that happened on the third day. Okay. Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, they go in because the guys are all hurting. They each take his sword and they come against the city undisturbed and killed every male. Hamor and his son Shechem they killed with the sword, and then they took Dinah from the house and left, riding away on their horses. We got her! We got her back! Not only did we get her back, but man, did we give them a lesson. Come home to Dad. Let Dad know what has happened, what is going on. And Jacob was not at all happy with their actions. It says, but Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you've brought trouble on me, making me a stench among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the parasites. I am but a few men. They'll gather against me and strike me. Then I'll be destroyed, my household and I. Well, there's a lot that you can get out of that. Okay. One of the things that you can get out of that is Jacob leaves the wrestling match with God. Although he's got a limp, he leaves it with his head up. Okay. And he's learned something. And now he goes and he meets his brother. And that all went really well. And he learned something. And now this thing happens with Dinah and Shimon and Levi. And a little bit of Jacob's old Jacob is back. He's like, oh no, I'm going to be afraid again. And that happens with Jacob. If you notice in the Bible, sometimes he's Israel, sometimes he's Jacob. Even after he's been given the new name of Israel, then again, sometimes he's Jacob. He's both. He's a little of both. Just like us, maybe, right? Okay. Now, this event is going to be remembered later in Genesis with Jacob's dying words over his sons. Was there a way that they would have been able to get Dinah back without doing that? I don't know. Probably. Maybe if they just walked in and, you know what? No, we don't agree that she's going to be your wife, and we will give you 400 shekels, and then we'll leave. Okay? Maybe that would have worked. I don't know. But what is going to be remembered is the violent nature of Simeon and Levi. Okay? And because of that, there are consequences. Like there always are. Okay? So now, then, God said to Jacob, get up, go up to Bethel and stay there. Make an altar there to God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. Remember, way back, okay, 20, however many years ago, way back. So Jacob said to his household and to everyone who was with him, who is that? Rachel, Leah, the concubines, all of his children, all of his servants. Jacob says these words, get rid of the foreign gods that are among you. Cleanse yourselves and change your clothes. This is the first Torah line that is drawn about other gods. Okay? First time that it happens in Torah. Now, we would wonder, why do they even have other gods? Okay, but remember, not only Abraham, but all the Hebrews and all who were going to be Hebrews, they were emerging out of paganism, right? And it would be nice if they were all like Abraham and crossed over and were done with it. But they weren't. Israel went back and forth again, in and out, into the worship of Yehovah and into the worship of idols, and back to Yehovah and back into the worship of idols. Okay? And here's one of the reasons why. One of the reasons. Obviously, we know that Yehovah is a jealous God. He doesn't want us worshiping or serving idols in any way, right? And one of the reasons why is that other gods demand actions that are unholy and unrighteous. Okay? In other words, they're bad. They're not good. They're evil. They're mean. Okay? They want to hurt you. They're not here to help you, and they demand actions that are unholy. Okay? In other words, worshiping them is going to be unacceptable. And the reason is not only because you're commanded not to do it, but the reason why you're commanded not to do it is because of what they do to you. Okay? This is why Paul wrote in Colossians this, therefore, put to death what is earthly in you. And here's a list. Sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desire, and greed. For that is what? Idolatry. Okay? And because of these things, God's wrath is coming on the sons of disobedience. Because of what? Because of these actions. So the gods led them to do evil actions. Is it like that today? Do other gods lead human beings to do evil, unholy actions? Okay? Or let me put it a different way. Does the worship, the bowing down to other gods and idols lead to doing unholy, unrighteous things? Yeah, it does. I think of the God of convenience. What happens when that God is worshipped? Babies die. Right? Well, it's not just the God of convenience. It would be the God of immorality, and then the God of convenience. Okay, so there's a lot that goes on in our world that when we look at it, we're like, oh yeah, that's really bad, but it's worse than that. It's worse. It's really bad. It's idolatry. It's the worship of idols. Okay, almost done with tonight's, and then we'll have some questions. So Israel journeyed on, and he set up his tent beyond the Tower of Eder. I don't know where it is. I want to know where it is. We'll learn one day. While Israel was living in that land, Reuben went and slept with his father's concubine, Bilhah, and Israel heard about it. So you read that, and then it just goes on. Like, oh, by the way, this happened, but there's not a word about it. Just that this happened. There will be a word about it later when Jacob is on his deathbed and he's looking out and he's going to look at Shimon and Levi and say, you guys are violent. And because of that, this, and this. But he's also going to look at Reuben and go, Reuben, by the way, remember when you slept with... So I don't even know if Reuben knew that Israel heard about it. We don't know that. It doesn't tell us. But anyway, okay. The last chapter is the list of the genealogies of Esau, who is known as Edom. Okay, and even though the Edomites are going to be enemies of Israel, Israel was not allowed to hate them. Forbidden to hate them. Why would that be? Because they're our brothers, right? They're children of Abraham. So why you have in Deuteronomy, Moses says you are not to detest an Edomite, for he is your brother. And, by the way, you are not to detest an Egyptian, for you were an outsider in his land. And what we learn from that is that over and over and over again, the Bible and the Torah, over and over in it, we learn that Yehovah cares for and loves all human beings. Every tribe. And you might ask, well, then why did he command them to go into the land and wipe all those guys out? And the reason was because he had a covenant with Israel. In that covenant with Israel, he promised that he would be an enemy to their enemies. See? Because of his love for Israel, the others that were going to be enemies of Israel were going to have to be judged. But that doesn't mean that God didn't love them. Just like he loved the Egyptians, even Pharaoh in Egypt. Even though he made an example of Pharaoh's hard-heartedness, that doesn't mean that he didn't love him, because he loves all and wants all to do what? Yeah, come to him.